And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored, a very interesting turn in the Payment Protection Program. And many of you remember that as PPP loans. So those loans were set up to help out struggling businesses throughout the pandemic. Now, celebrities like Jay-Z, Tom Brady, Khloe Kardashian, and Kanye West have taken a piece of the pie, borrowing millions of dollars. Nearly all of those loans, including the interest, have been forgiven by the federal government, saying you don't have to pay it back. Tonight, we're learning why they're catching that very big break from our expert.
Well, as it was rolled out and Secretary Mnuchin admitted the fault and they made some modifications, particularly after the initial round of stimulus for paycheck protection ran out after $349 billion went to places like Shake Shack, places like Ruth's Chris. They're getting $20 million. And then small, particularly women and minority-owned businesses are getting nothing because they already have lower access to financial institutions. So these sophisticated entities already had the mechanisms in place to scoop all this money up first before people who needed it had it. So the Treasury admitted this, and then they modified it later on to say, okay, this is if you can demonstrate a reasonable need, and publicly traded companies have access to capital, so there's no way you're going to demonstrate a good faith need. But we'll differentiate businesses where they're owned by or headed by folks like Jay-Z, because really they're in separate buckets. And so as long as they met that 8 to 24 week expenditure for payroll related, which then later included things like gas and light bills, they were allowed to be forgiven. That's the statute. And it was very haphazardly written. It was rushed out to try to offset much prevarication and delay on the part of Congress and the president getting these things out in a timely manner. So as soon as they realized, oh wait, we've been dilly-dallying too long, they rolled all this out. But it's not Jay-Z's money. A lot of Jay-Z's net worth is tied into estimated valuations of liquor companies and estimated valuations of clothing companies. And if the federal government created buckets like private sector folks, where Jay-Z's house is separate from Jay-Z's company where he employs people, the LLC, then we'd probably have a more solvent Social Security system.
Now, the second modification that we saw from the federal government, was that successful in rooting out many of these companies that, had the resources that were there and available to them, instead of just taking advantage of this where women and minorities could not even get in? Did the second modification work? Did for the federal government with PPP loans?
No, because unfortunately, many of the businesses that were then accessing it were using excessive valuations or fraudulence to the point of saying, I've got 500 employees and they've reported zero for the past 10 years, but suddenly they have 500 employees and they need a $10 million loan, and you see them on the TikTok with a Ferrari talking about how successful they are. Well, yeah, you were successful in defrauding Uncle Sam because they didn't have the enforcement authority and tools that we've now seen, even recently, even this week, that $80 billion for the IRS to expand enforcement, hopefully for people earning over $400,000 a year of household income, et cetera, not us low-income folks working in education and media, but hopefully it's going to be emphasized, right? It's going to emphasize a lot of these fraudsters, but they didn't have that mechanism in place. And the IRS was already complaining about being overworked. They and the SBA were saying our technology's out of date. We don't have the right applications, the right software compatibility to coordinate among agencies. So the second round didn't go where it needed to, even to the tune of maybe $79 billion. Almost 15% of the money dispersed may have been either completely fraudulently attained or at least in part exaggerated need.
Yeah, and we're not saying that these entertainers that we have named defrauded the government in any form or fashion. However, the follow-up question is to have these loans forgiven. Now, that has been what, standard with the federal government?
It has been if you have the mechanisms in place. And one of the benefits that many of these celebrities have is teams of accountants and lawyers to make sure that they're expending things as needed, right? And so we look at these very, very sort of stringent date ideas within the federal government recently with the raid on President Trump's house, right? 92, 93 days out from the midterm elections, because 90 days is the FBI's window. We know that the federal government likes these very precise, Eastern Standard Time deadlines. And so you have to make sure that if you say you're going to pay it off or expend those funds for employees, that those employees actually came back to work and that they accepted all the money and no other sources. Well, if you're a mom and pop shop, it's a lot more difficult to ensure that those employees come back to work for the wages versus a place like Khloe Kardashian or Jay-Z's, where you say, okay, we just need this money expended. And with your lawyers that if you spend all 1.2 million, even if you spend 10,000 on one person's salary and 2,000 on another, it's forgiven. Some people may have not had the sophisticated team to say, okay, you can do this, but not that, and have been too cautious in accepting or expending the money, and then you got to pay it back.
Right. Unfortunate. Dr. Dietrich von Biedenfeld joining us here on The Factor Uncensored tonight. Always good to see you, sir.